A royal healing. The kingdom of Alderwood had known peace for generations under the wise rule of King Eirik. His daughter, Princess Lyra, was beloved throughout the realm for her kindness and intelligence. Having studied with the royal physicians since childhood, she possessed a keen understanding of healing arts that rivaled the most experienced practitioners in the kingdom. Her mother, the late Queen Elara, had been known as a gifted healer herself, and the princess had inherited both her compassion and her talents. On the eve of the kingdom's centennial celebration, word arrived that Prince Thomas of the neighboring realm of Westervale would be attending. Rumors had long circulated about the prince, tales of a mysterious affliction that had plagued him since birth, causing his skin to bear peculiar silvery markings that spread with each passing year. The royal physicians of Westervale had tried every remedy, yet the disease continued its relentless advance. "Father," Lyra said as they sat together in the grand study reviewing preparations for the festival, "is it true that Prince Thomas will be joining us? I have heard much about his condition." King Eirik looked up from his scrolls, his eyes reflecting concern. "Indeed, my daughter. His father, King Aldric, seeks new perspectives on his son's affliction. Though we have had our differences with Westervale in the past, I could not refuse such a request." "I would like to help if possible," Lyra replied, her eyes bright with purpose. "Perhaps our medical knowledge differs enough from theirs that we might see something their physicians have missed." The king smiled at his daughter's determination. "Your mother would be proud of your compassion. You may certainly offer your assistance, but remember, many have tried to cure the prince's condition. Do not be disheartened if you cannot succeed where others have failed." When the day of the celebration arrived, the castle was adorned with vibrant banners and fragrant flowers. Nobles from across the land gathered in the grand ballroom, their finery dazzling under the light of 100 crystal chandeliers. Princess Lyra stood beside her father at the throne, greeting guests with genuine warmth. The herald's voice rang out, announcing the arrival of Prince Thomas of Westervale. A hush fell over the crowd as a tall figure entered the hall, clothed in elegant garments of deep blue that covered most of his body. Only his face and hands were visible, revealing the silvery markings that resembled delicate frost patterns spreading across his skin. Despite his affliction, the prince carried himself with dignity, his eyes clear and intelligent. As their gazes met across the crowded hall, Lyra felt something stir within her. A recognition of a kindred spirit, perhaps, or simply curiosity about the man behind the rumors. Prince Thomas approached the throne and bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, Princess Lyra," he said, his voice deeper than she had expected. "Thank you for your gracious invitation. Westervale is honored to join in your celebration." "The honor is ours, Prince Thomas," King Eirik replied. "We hope your stay in Alderwood brings you joy." Throughout the evening, Lyra found her attention drawn repeatedly to the prince. Unlike many of the guests who maintained a respectful but noticeable distance from him, she approached him directly during the feast. "I understand you've consulted with many healers regarding your condition," she said without preamble as she took the seat beside him. "Would you permit me to learn more about it? I have studied healing arts extensively." The prince's surprise at her directness quickly gave way to appreciation for her lack of pretense. "Most people prefer to pretend my affliction doesn't exist, Princess. Your honesty is refreshing." Over the course of the celebration, which extended into a week-long festival, Lyra and Thomas spent many hours together. He shared the history of his condition, how it had first appeared as a small mark over his heart on his 5th birthday, gradually expanding year by year. She told him of her studies and the ancient texts she had discovered in Alderwood's vast libraries. "There is a theory," she explained one afternoon as they walked through the royal gardens, "that some ailments are not merely physical, but connected to deeper aspects of our being. The old texts speak of conditions that manifest outwardly but originate from within, from the soul itself. Thomas looked skeptical. My father's physicians would scoff at such notions. They believe only in what they can see and touch. And yet they have found no cure, Lyra pointed out gently. Perhaps it is time to consider other possibilities. As the days passed, their conversations deepened, ranging from philosophical discussions about healing to personal stories about their lives. Lyra learned that despite his royal status, Thomas had often felt isolated due to his condition. In turn, she confided her own feelings of solitude, not from any physical affliction, but from the expectations placed upon her as the sole heir to Alderwood's throne. "We are both trapped in our own ways," Thomas observed as they stood on the castle ramparts, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "You by duty, me by disease." "Perhaps," Lyra agreed, "but traps can sometimes become doorways if we look at them differently." Neither of them acknowledged the growing affection between them, though it was evident to anyone who observed their interactions. King Eirik noticed the change in his daughter, how her eyes brightened whenever the prince entered a room, how her laughter flowed more freely in his presence. "Be cautious, my child," he advised her privately. "I do not speak against Prince Thomas, for he seems a worthy man despite his affliction. But loving him comes with complications you must consider." "I know, father," Lyra replied, "but my heart does not obey caution." As the festival drew to a close, Lyra asked Thomas to meet her in the ancient healing chamber beneath the castle, a sacred space where Alderwood's royal healers had practiced their arts for generations. The circular room was lined with shelves of herbs and elixirs, its center dominated by a pool of water fed by a natural spring. "My mother brought me here often," Lyra explained as they entered the dimly lit chamber. "She believed the waters possessed special properties, not magical, precisely, but connected to something deeper than our ordinary understanding." Thomas gazed around the room with interest. "It's peaceful here. I can see why healers would choose this place." "I've been studying your condition through every text in our libraries," Lyra said, gesturing to a table covered with open books and scattered notes. "And I've formed a theory. The markings spread when you're under stress or when your spirits are low, don't they?" The prince looked startled. "How did you know?" "I've never told anyone that observation." "Because it aligns with what I've read about soul-manifested conditions," she explained. "They respond to our emotional states, worsening when we feel isolated or despairing, improving when we experience connection and hope." She approached him slowly, taking his hands in hers. "Thomas, I believe your condition is not merely a disease of the body, but a manifestation of something deeper. Perhaps a loneliness that has marked you since childhood, a feeling of being separate from others." He looked away, his voice barely audible. "My mother died shortly after my 5th birthday, when the first mark appeared." "I'm so sorry," Lyra whispered. "That connection can't be coincidence." Over the following days, Lyra worked with Thomas on a treatment unlike any he had tried before. They began each morning with his immersion in the healing pool, followed by the application of specially prepared herbal compresses. But the most important element, Lyra insisted, was the time they spent together, talking honestly about their fears, hopes, and the pain they had each carried. "Healing begins with being known," she told him, "truly known, without masks or pretense." As the final day of his visit approached, Thomas noticed something remarkable. The silvery markings had ceased their expansion for the first time in his memory. In a few places, they even seemed to have receded slightly. "It's working," he said in wonder, examining his reflection in the pool. "Lyra, your treatment is actually working." She shook her head, standing beside him. "Not my treatment. It's us, this connection between us. The healing comes from being seen and accepted fully. That night at the farewell banquet, Thomas approached King Eirik formally. "Your Majesty, I must speak with you about a matter of great importance." The king nodded, already suspecting what the young man might say. "I have come to care deeply for Princess Lyra," Thomas stated, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I know that my condition makes me a complicated choice for her, but I believe, we both believe, that what we have found together is rare and precious." King Eirik studied the prince thoughtfully. "My daughter has always possessed wisdom beyond her years. If she has chosen you, there must be merit in that choice." He leaned forward. "But I must ask, what of your condition? Will it continue to progress? I cannot ignore my concern for her future happiness." "For the first time in my life, there is hope," Thomas replied. "Under Lyra's care, the affliction has ceased its advance. We believe it may even be reversing." Before the king could respond, a commotion arose in the ballroom. Lyra had collapsed, her face unnaturally pale. As Thomas rushed to her side, he noticed with horror that faint silvery marks had appeared on her wrists, marks identical to his own. "What have I done?" he whispered, gathering her in his arms. "My disease, it somehow transferred to her." The court physicians were summoned immediately, but they were baffled by the princess's condition. In desperation, Thomas carried her to the healing chamber, laying her gently beside the pool. "This is my fault," he said brokenly as King Eirik joined them. "In trying to heal me, she has taken on my burden." "No," came Lyra's weak voice as she regained consciousness. "This was my choice." She looked at her father. The ancient texts spoke of this possibility, that some afflictions can be shared, their burden divided between two souls bound by love. "You knew this might happen?" Thomas asked, aghast. She nodded slightly. "I suspected, but I didn't tell you because I knew you would refuse." "Of course I would have refused. How could I allow you to sacrifice yourself this way?" "It's not a sacrifice if it's freely chosen," she replied, her hand finding his. Where their skin touched, both of their markings seemed to pulse with a soft inner light. As they watched in amazement, the silvery patterns began to change, not spreading or growing darker, but instead transforming, becoming more like ordinary birthmarks than the frost-like patterns they had been. "What's happening?" King Eirik asked, his voice hushed. An elderly court physician who had been observing from the doorway stepped forward. "I've read of this in the oldest healing texts. The sharing of a soul-bound condition between two who love truly can sometimes transform its nature entirely. Neither cured completely, perhaps, but the burden made bearable through division." Over the coming weeks, the transformation continued. The markings on both Lyra and Thomas stabilized into delicate, almost decorative patterns that no longer spread or caused pain. The court physicians declared it a miracle, but Lyra knew better. It was simply the power of connection, overcoming isolation. 6 months later, at their wedding ceremony, the prince and princess wore garments specially designed to display their matching marks. No longer symbols of disease, but testaments to a love powerful enough to transform suffering into beauty. "Two souls, one burden shared," the officiant declared as they exchanged vows. "What was once a curse becomes a blessing when carried together." As they sealed their union with a kiss, their matching marks glowed softly, not with the ominous light of disease, but with the warm radiance of a healing long awaited and finally found. In the years that followed, healers from across many kingdoms came to study with the royal couple, learning the principles of emotional and spiritual healing that had transformed their condition. The healing chambers of Alderwood became renowned not just for treating physical ailments, but for addressing the deeper wounds of the soul. And though their skin would always bear the silvery traces of what had once been a devastating affliction, Thomas and Lyra wore them proudly, as reminders that sometimes the deepest healing comes not from medicine, but from the courage to be fully known